Yo, what's up? What's up? Welcome back to another episode of The Review, where we talk about 9 ways to make it through resistance and maintain creativity. I am Tommy. This is my friend Mike Tyson, and we are back again. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great, brother. How about yourself?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I think resistance, man, I feel like the title of my life should be resistance, and it's so hard. I don't know. I came up with this one because I felt like it was so hard to find power, in resistance, right? Because you know what happens is it's like in life, right? Most people get promoted to their highest level and it's not even their highest optimal level. It's almost like their highest level where they don't completely fail, but they can't break through the glass ceiling of leveling up to the next level, right? And that makes things tough because it's like, people get sucked into, they've had, when they decide that they've had enough and we want them to keep going, you know, but that's hard, right? Because it's like resistance, a lot of times it's about, seeing that finish line. But how can you see that finish line as something that you don't quite understand? You know what I mean? Like there's been multiple times in my life, especially being in the military, where like I just couldn't see why I was doing a certain thing, right? And I don't know if it's just a battle rhythm thing or something like that, or like how people kind of the military set up. But a lot of times you don't understand the why, and I find when I don't understand the why, that's when I'm like I don't have any passion for this, right? But I started to realize that why a lot of times is found in the meaning of the process. We talked about in earlier episodes about the process of, leveling up and moving forward and going through and being passionate about what you do. That process is where I find that meaning. Because a lot of times if you don't know the why, it can be very, very discouraging. And I found that throughout, life, resistance is the most like I experience the most resistance when I'm almost done with something. It's almost like that situation. I feel like sometimes that situation is trying to break me, and I know that's not the reality. But you're like, man, this is just overwhelming, right? Because a lot of times when you're in those moments, you got to make hard decisions. There is no, usually there's nobody telling you to keep going. You know what I mean? Like it's just you in that situation. What's been your experience as far as resistance and you know that finish line when you get close to that finish line? What things have you experienced? A lot of resistance in, or you felt like it was kind of keeping you in a place where it didn't feel optimal.
Well, I mean, man, I have. When you talk about focusing on the process, it really kind of eliminates the finish line. Something that like what we talk about with our staff a lot is surrendering the results of what we do and just focusing on the process, our role in what we do. I definitely agree with you thinking that understanding the why is very important. It's a very strong motivator. But what
Mhm.
happens when you don't know the why? What
Yeah.
happens when you're a cog in a machine? And that sounds like a terrible thing, but a lot of times that's what we are. We have roles to play in these giant mechanisms that are going on throughout life, this giant process called life. And sometimes we are just the cog in the machine. It's our ego a lot of times that makes us think that we're more important than what we are, but also it makes us think that, hey man, I'm about to arrive, or I've arrived, I've achieved my goal. Well, if you've really achieved your goal, you probably stop moving forward. So what's the point of even reaching the finish line?
Mm.
If the glory and the good stuff is in the process. But I think that you touched on something really important, talking about glass ceilings, talking about how we perceive resistance.
Mhm.
Because when we perceive resistance as something we control, we feel it's something we can overcome. But when
Ooh.
that is outside of our control, then it becomes something very personal. It becomes, maybe discrimination,
Mhm.
prejudice, things like this that we feel that no matter how good we become at what we do, we can't break that glass ceiling. And man, that is defeating, you know, and
Yeah.
and so what do you do? Because that's a very real thing, at the end of the day. And it's easy for me to say, but at the end of the day, it's I'm responsible for my effort levels, for my
Mhm.
part in this process and what's going on, and I can't really control the results. So that's
Exactly.
kind of how I deal with resistance and getting close to that finish line, is that I focus on what the job is to do today. It's a
That's real.
never ending process. You
Well,
know,
and
we
looking
like
at that in depth, what were you saying, brother? Go ahead.
I would say, like, so what we deal with homelessness and addiction. These are symptoms of social ills that are probably going to be around forever. They've always been around. So there is no permanent solution to the problem. So there is no finish line. It's a
Yeah.
constant. Every day somebody has to show up to be
Yeah.
compassionate and help others.
Wow, that's deep. Well, in that passion, you address the fact that it takes passion, and I find that a lot of times it's the passion and that fire that I had for that thing that I chose to do that
Yeah.
helps kind of will, WILL me through that situation.
Yeah.
And that's hard, man, because you find yourself in some positions, and I've been in some positions where I was questioning, is it my race? I'm like, is it because I'm different?
Yeah.
Is it because I don't fit in with a certain particular group? And
Yeah.
then once I realized, I'm like, I had to tell myself, control your controllables. And once
Yes.
I started doing that, I'm like, okay, in a lot of ways, once you start controlling your controllables and you see the forest for the trees, you start to realize, like, you were stopping yourself. Because even if it was your race,
Yeah.
if it was because they didn't like you, there's a certain level of excellence that you can strive towards where they can't stop you.
They can't stop you. Yep.
And even if you have to leave that organization, when you leave that organization, if you focus, if you bite down, you are going to have the tools to be successful for years to come. And that changes generations,
Yeah.
because you went there, you put your head down, you took the notes that you need to have, and now you become unstoppable once it feels like those chains are unleashed. And so that's really awesome, Mike, that you brought this one up, and or I brought this one up, I guess, and you
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
able to elaborate on it and kind of bring it home, because those things that we can't control, being male, female, race, all those things, they do play a role,
They do.
and
Yes.
we don't know what role they're playing. So in a lot of ways, if we're not bringing our best, we're just making assumptions. You know what I mean? And those assumptions a
Absolutely.
lot of times can dig real deep on us and kind of hold us back and hinder us.
Well,
So
and they're based on biases.
yeah,
They're not based on reality.
yeah,
So already you're basing it on stuff that's not going to work out.
exactly. That's facts. That's
But
facts.
like you talk about with the title, man, with resistance at the finish line, I have found too that in our work that we do when things are the darkest, that if we stay pushing through, because there have been moments where I call them gut check moments where I felt like quitting or giving up, but there's always seems to be something greater on the other side, even if it's not just pushing through that moment. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, things are better today. See, I could have gave up, but I didn't. I kept going.
Mhm.
And now I can face even more challenges because I made it through that.
100%, 100%. That is accurate, man. Well, I appreciate you, tapping in and doing this series with me. You know what I'm saying? For the viewers, stay tuned in, stay locked in. Our next episode, we're gonna talk about, Mike's gonna lead us off with having a plan, man. How creativity is only spontaneous for geniuses. Little word salad.
Isn't that the worst, man? When you start tripping over your words and then you can't get it back on track, you're like, ah.
Hey, wait till you get the podcast really rolling on your side, man. It's gonna be a trip.
Hey, I lose my Achilles heel is losing my train of thought. I could be dead in the middle of a conversation and get another conversation going in my head and completely lose where I'm at. And right in the middle of a podcast, I'm like, I just lost my train of thought, man. And I can't get, and there's no getting it back. Until the other person starts talking, and then you're like, well, now I got to interrupt them. Well, I can't interrupt them. Now I got to wait. What do I do?
Oh man, we are way too much alike, bro. I get like that all the time. But anyway, we appreciate y'all. Until further ado, I'm Tommy. This is Mike. We appreciate y'all. Keep tuning in.